I'm with Richard Murphy, who will be known to some people for his interest in finance centres, tax havens. But in our series, Faith and Finance, he is also a Christian. So I'm especially interested to hear what he has to say about the role of Christianity and finance centres.
Hello. I think that's a fascinating question. I'm often asked why I do the work that I do. And I don't there's very much doubt that one of the reasons why I do it is because I have a Christian faith. For me, that is important. I certainly don't use it as an opportunity to evangelise. I don't think that's part of my role at all. It's a personal issue for me that my Christian faith guides my perceptions of what are right and wrong. I take it very seriously that I think the message of Christianity is good news for the poor. And I believe that one of the tasks that a Christian should undertake is to improve the lot of the poor if they are able to do so. And in that sense, that obviously has guided my understanding of the role of finance and the role of finance centres. Because when you look at a finance centre, it's very hard to believe that it isn't there to improve the lot of the rich, without, frankly, very much consideration of the lot of the poor. In fact, no consideration at all, I suspect, in most cases, of the lot of the poor, because this is about, and I saw it when I arrived on Jersey Airport, this is about wealth management. Look at all the adverts as you arrive. Now, there's nothing wrong with wealth. I'm not going to be saying here that people should not have wealth. And I'm certainly not going to be saying there shouldn't be business, and I'm certainly not saying there shouldn't be profit, because I have some personal wealth, I'm sure it's true to say. I am a person who has managed businesses, and I have made profit for my own businesses and on behalf of clients. So I'm not apologising for business. What I am saying is that within that environment where you are making money, where you are making choices about the way in which you make money, and where you look at the consequences of the way in which you make money, I think a Christian should be asking the question, how does this impact upon the poor? Now, that's a very broadly based question. Obviously, one of the most important ways of dealing with the issue of how do you impact upon the poor is actually to provide opportunities for people themselves to make money. And to me, if I'm honest, one of the greatest pleasures of ever running a business was actually creating employment opportunities. I've loved creating jobs. I have in my time, I hope, made quite a lot of employment opportunities for quite a lot of people, and I hope I was a good employer. I'm not an employer at the moment, but I have been of, I suspect, thousands of people at some point. And I think that's an incredible privilege. And you look at that and say, am I paying a fair reward? Am I encouraging these people? Am I fulfilling their potential? Are they having the opportunity to fulfill their potential? Am I training them? Will they go away at the end of this employment period better equipped to deal with the next stage of their own lives? And I think it's one of those questions which I asked. I think that is, in a way, transferring wealth, creating opportunity. I'm very interested, though, also about the way in which you structure business. And why am I involved with finance centres in that way? Why have I ended up being quite well known for my work in this particular area? Why have I written about it so much? Because I am very worried that what happens in a finance centre to me does not appear to reflect the Christian principles that I believe are important. What are those principles that I think are important? Well, one is quite clearly honesty, transparency, truth. For quite some time, I was a member of the Quakers. Now they are known obviously as the Quakers, but also the Religious Society of Friends. What most people don't know is that actually they are the Religious Society of the Friends of the Truth. And I think truth, openness, accountability are key issues. Because in the Christian faith you are going to confess your sins. I think that is part of the process of Christian worship. You admit your mistakes. I mean, I don't think sin means more than that you've made a mistake, and we all do. This doesn't mean that's something terrible that you've got to confess to, but we've all done something which we would rather have done better. And in that sense, that requires a degree of honesty with ourselves, and I think it requires a degree of honesty with others. It so happens that that same degree of honesty that I expect of myself and others is also the underpinning of the market. Within the market, you need to have openness, honesty, transparency, accountability, because if you do, people will be able to exchange with each other in an environment of trust. Now, I think that's incredibly important. It's been fundamental to the Judeo-Christian tradition. If you go right back to the early history of the temple in the Bible, you'll find that one of the first things it did was actually basically be the upkeeper of weights and measures, standards of trading, a very long time ago. And so there is this tradition. It is inside the Old Testament. You will act fairly. You will consider the consequence of your trading. You will be honest. You will account for what you do, including accounting for the payment of tax as a consequence of what you do. I've done some work on the theology of tax. I think that we do have a duty to pay to government what is fairly expected of us, and from that I have developed the concept of tax compliance, of trying to pay the right amount of tax, but no more. I don't ask anyone to pay tax voluntarily, in the right place at the right time, where right is an honest definition that what you put on your tax return reflects what you actually undertook. And I'm afraid to say, I think that tax havens do not honour that tradition.
Is there in the tax havens, and obviously they don't like being called tax havens.
No, they don't.
They're probably more regulation havens to a larger extent than tax havens.
Well, both.
But is there, in your view of them, is there a proper role for them? Can they have a useful role in the world?
Well, one of the reasons why I'm in Jersey is to talk about the possibility that there could be a role for a very limited number of locations to prevent double taxation. I don't like double taxation any more than I like double non-taxation. Double non-taxation is not right, and that is fundamentally what, at the moment, most regulatory and tax havens want to do. They want to provide people with the opportunity from outside a location to record their transactions in a tax haven, and as a consequence either avoid the regulatory obligations which arise from that transaction or the tax consequences of that transaction. And that is my definition of what a tax haven is. I'm not saying that's illegal, it's a way to get round an obligation. Well, I'm not sure that as a Christian you try to get round something, you try to embrace what is the right thing to do. And I can't see how that's consistent with this regulatory or tax avoidance industry. Let's leave the illegality entirely aside. But is there a role for a tax haven, a no-tax jurisdiction, if it prevents double taxation? If there are faults in the world economic system, and there probably are some, where as a consequence of the failure of tax jurisdictions to properly interact one with another, then some transactions would end up being double taxed, and there is a way to get around that by using a jurisdiction to be accountable for what it's doing, but openly and honestly saying our role is to help people to construct transactions in a way that means that they are not double taxed, but I stress openly and honestly, so everything is on the record and there's no attempt at secrecy in doing this. Instead saying, look, this problem exists, let's deal with it. And let's honestly charge for helping people to deal with this problem which exists, which other countries don't seem to be able to resolve. Then I think, yes, that is a possibility.
Because a lot of Jersey's interest, activities to do with trusts. Trusts are set up for all sorts of reasons, not just taxation. There might be arrangements within a family, or the laws of a country might be such they might make it difficult for people to inherit money or to transfer money.
I have a real problem with a trust that is set up outside the jurisdiction in which people live. If the law of your country puts a restriction on the way in which you may inherit, I'm afraid to say that is the price of living in that country. I think that we have a duty to uphold the law. If you want to look at the Christian tradition of this, look at what St. Paul said in Romans about the obligation of a Christian to pay tax to the Romans even if they did not like the Roman administration, which very clearly they didn't. But he actually said it was not the Christian's right to say no and ignore that duty. And I think that if you are living in a country, and obviously there are some despotic nations on earth, and that's, I think, the extreme is always a difficult situation. Most countries are not despotic. Most countries which we're talking about, where people are creating trust, are actually very often democracies where their law is being created for good reason, where it reflects a strong social tradition, and in that case to try to relocate assets artificially to another location such as Jersey to get around the law is, in my opinion, an attempt to subvert the rule of law in the place in which you choose to live. If you choose to leave that place altogether to get around that law, that's one thing. But live there and try and get around it by creating a Jersey Trust, I'm sorry, I think that's something else altogether.
Jersey's very keen now looking at new markets, always looking for new markets. And they're looking at India and China, like everybody is, as they're expanding apparently rapidly. Can you see that Jersey might have a role there in those countries? Have they got any economic knowledge that they can take to those places?
No. There's a simple answer, no. I do not believe that they can add value inside those locations.